When I asked my mother when was the last time she took the train and where did she go, and she tells me, yes, of course I took the train because this train in Jerusalem connects us with the rest of Palestine. When you look at the old photos and you imagine how the lifestyle was at that time, and when you visit this train station today, it's like a Disney park. It's full of restaurants, full of people who are completely indifferent to the history of the space, who are completely ignorant towards Jerusalem. They don't belong. You know, my son often tells me, you know, Mama, these people, they don't seem to belong at all to this city. It doesn't go with the spirit of the people today. We were the owners of these houses. 77% of West Jerusalem before 48 was Palestinian owned. And when I talk about Palestinians, I talk about Muslims, Christians, and the minority of Jewish people. The new first train station, as they call it, of Jerusalem, look at the kitchens inside the restaurants. Most of those people will be Palestinians, probably from the West Bank or from marginalized areas in Jerusalem, with very low salaries. They are treated like garbage. قد ايه صار لك تشتغل هون زمان؟
لا مش كثير، شهرين.
أنت بتعرف إنه إيش هي محطة القطارات؟ بتتعلم ولا بس شغل؟ وين بتتعلم؟
بتتعلم ببير زيت قانون.
وإيش بتشتغل هون؟
على البور. قهوة.
طيب منيح، مبسوط يعني، بيعطوك معاش منيح؟ وشكلكم كلكم فلسطينية اللي بتشتغلوا جوا، مش
في يهود.
في يهود يعني، بس إنه بيعاملوكم معاملة منيحة؟
إلى حد ما، بس إلا تلاقي العنصرية. شيء وشيء. يعني مثلا بتلاقيش مسؤول عربي. مثلا. كثير محلات، هي شام. وياك هذا؟ شو يا معلم؟
اسمع، احنا اسياد البلد، تخليهمش هيك يعاملوك بطريقه مش حلوه.
نكون واقعيين ونمشي مع هاي الفكره. طيب كيف بدنا نحارب؟ كيف بدنا ناخذ حقنا؟ قانون. غصب عنهم، عشان يصير الموضوع غصب عنهم، مش انه الشغله بس يعني هيك في العربده وخلاص، او في الهمجيه وخلاص، لا.
اسمع، بتمنى لك التوفيق. بديش اسالك حتى ايش اسمك، بس يعني انا مقدسيه كمان، ودار ابوي هيها هون بالبقعه. سامع بالبقعه؟ My father's house is exactly opposite this street, which becomes the lower Bakha in Arabic, or Baqat Tahta, or the Greek colony. So let's go to my father's house. And I hope they won't call the police. So we'll do it very quickly. This is my father's house, the house of Farid al-Imam. My father lived in this house for 8 years, from the 40s until 48, with his mother. He was chased out of the house, like most of the Palestinians, because they wanted to confirm the statement of Golda Meir that this is a country, a land without people. But all these people were living in these homes. In 1998, Netanyahu came into governance, and as he's a money maker and money lover, He wants to privatize Palestinian houses in the same time as Israeli telecom and electricity, water, all these elements which can be privatized so that he can gain more money. My father's house was sold for $4 million by Udi Kaplan, who's a real estate agent who came from America. Neither my mother nor my son agree to the fact that I'm very passionately and emotionally involved in the past. You can see that Hani didn't even come with me because he wants to avoid all these emotional issues. When I came here last time, from outside, I was taking a photo. The people inside the house saw the flash. They parked the car in the middle of the street. They called the police. They arrested me. They put the handcuffs in my feet and in my hands. I told them, but what crime have I done? What's my case? I just took a photo.
We're not a banana republic. We have a court system. We have a court system who is definitely not in the pocket of the right wing or the religious of this country. No one can get away with just driving someone out of anywhere in this country. I mean, we know the British were here. We know exactly who was kicked out in what years. And 1948, the Jews were also kicked out of the area, taken as prisoners of wars. That's real being kicked out and evicted by the Arab world. No Arab is being pushed out or kicked out of anywhere. Actually being driven out, no such thing. There have been wars here. We've seen this country has seen 17 conquerors. We're familiar with wars that have tried to driven us out. We're not here as imperialists. We have returned home as the indigenous people to our own homeland, and there's basically nothing that the world or the Arab world can do about it. And whatever attempts they've tried won't succeed. The meek or timid Jew living in some ghetto or shtetl under the Nazis or under the Tsar or under whoever it may be, the Paritz. We are today a strong people who have come back to our land. We're back here now, and no amount of Arab terrorism, violence or hatred is going to kick me out. And they will be eaten up for breakfast. You know, it's a saying from Australia that may be taken the wrong way, but it doesn't mean that me personally will handle it because we have authorities here. Any Arab that wants to drive me out, someone that wants to...
What will you do to them?
Someone that wants to drive me out, someone that wants to stab my, God forbid, my children like we've seen before, you know, that person will be eaten up for breakfast. Now, that won't be something I would do personally. The Jewish people, the state, the police, whatever has to be done, they will be handled. Not only are we looking over the Temple Mount here, you know, the place where the Golden Dome is, you know, that's the place of the Holy of Holies. This is what the Arab world wants, and this is what they'll never get. Abraham's children don't get along. Some brothers don't get along. In this particular case, in fact, it's even worse because there's parts of a very, very violent streak in Esav and Ishmael, which is the combination and part of the Muslim world today. There's a dictum that says Esav hates Jacob. Was he upset that Abraham or Isaac only gave certain blessings to him and certain other blessings to him? The children of Abraham have been blessed in many different ways. But the Jewish people, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, King David, King Solomon, all the way to little Daniel Luria today in Jerusalem, is this one chain that's been blessed in a different way. The little land of Israel, we have the covenant with God. We have returned home. The Zionist dream is being realized all the time. And as the indigenous people here, the world, and especially the Arab world, is going to have to understand that at some point in time.
Today I live in Sheikh Jarrah, but I live spiritually, if I may say so, in the western part of the city. I wasn't born yet in 1948 during the Nakba, but I feel that the Nakba is grounded in me. These tiles are tiles which I got from my father's house. Actually, I repossessed these tiles when the house was put on sale, and they were uprooting all the tiles and all what is in the house. I chose to put them and document my history and my story. Our ultimate goal is actually to preserve cultural heritage, and precisely Palestinian cultural heritage in Jerusalem, knowing very well that on a daily level, Israel attempts to erase everything called Palestinian, anything non-Jewish. Therefore, you think how you want to preserve and protect your traditions, your rituals, your roots, whether it's the language, food, falafel, hummus, whether it's the kufiya and the embroidered dresses, that Israel is taking them all as representation. I will accept not to claim my father's house. And I thought, okay, I'll accept that for the sake of peace. I'll accept not claiming my father's house for the sake of my son living in justice, in equality, in freedom. I see a very, 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 very sad, depressing situation we live in. I am very worried about my living here.
My mother would be very emotional and very about Jerusalem and about her father's house that was stolen and about all this stuff. So she's very attached to the past and to the emotional heritage, let's call it. For me, for example, I try to focus more on the present. What to do in the present, like what can make my life better now. I'm an artist, so this is important for my art because my art is not ready-made. It's also about exploration and investigation. I had my first exhibition when I was 16, and it was photography. At that time, it was the first Intifada. All the streets were filled with stickers and posters and graffitis everywhere. So it was like walking in a big piece of art. This series is called Reconstruction because it's about reconstructing the reality of the city. So this series of work is my latest work. It's called Wonders and Signs. One can see it as a metaphor of Jerusalem because of the layers on top of each other, the layers of history, the layers of writings of messages or political messages. And then you have the soldiers coming and covering them with white paint. And after it's covered with white paint, the Palestinians come back and they put a new message on it. Jerusalem is also a big ball, a big bunch of things. So it's not easy to find your place. You feel like you're an intruder. Paradoxically, the people that come from abroad, they feel home, right? Because it's their promised land and for whatever reason, you know.
Most people think that this place has been always a battleground between religions, and that's not true. Because before 1948, whether you were Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, we all saw ourselves as Palestinian Muslims, Palestinian Christians, Palestinian Jews. we have to know the truth. But you have to understand the context. Most of the population of the country was Palestinian, mainly Muslim and Jewish and Christian, but mainly Muslim. Minority was Christian, around 10%, and 5% were Jews. And there has always been synagogues, churches, and mosques. The shared values what really underlines the relationship between us. It is not the religion. I do not care if they pray on Friday or Saturday or Sunday. I care about how they treat me. We are all one people. But what is divisive is where do you stand on the policies of your government when it dehumanizes me. We read the Bible through Palestinian eyes, and we read it in the context of living under occupation. Jesus lived under occupation, became a refugee under occupation. His miracles were done under occupation. The thousands gathered around him under occupation. So we see how really Jesus resisted the occupation, and we try to walk in the same footsteps. Samia Khouri is one of the founders of Sabil, and she is an excellent writer, and she has an excellent blog.
Most of the Israelis are secular Jews, but of course they use this to justify that this is their city. And then you find all these crazy Christians, I call them. They call themselves Christian Zionists. Their theory is completely un-Christian. Because, I mean, when they say all the Jews have to gather here, the Jews, the Israelis, are happy about this part of the theory. But then, so that the Messiah can come, and when the Messiah comes, they have to become Christians. And those who don't become Christians, then they will have to be killed. I mean, what kind of a religion is this? What kind of a God is this God? When the Messiah comes, if they don't believe, then they have to be killed. Israel goes along with them. They accept the fact, the first part of it, which is having them come over here. But that makes many people say, well, if this is God's will, I mean, who wants God's will?
I'm a professor at Al-Quds University, and my campus is basically, the main campus is about 3 minutes by car, before the wall. Today I have to drive, it depends on the traffic. If I'm lucky, that will be like between half an hour and 45 minutes, that's if I'm lucky. I'm reluctant, but I almost kicked the wall. I feel literally terrible because at one point I had 3 kids at the university, studying at the university. Collectively, we would waste 8 hours every day going and coming back from the university. It's a separation wall. It's an apartheid wall. It separates Palestinian from Palestinian only. I've taught at this building. I've taught at this building for many years. And I would have arrived. Now I have to go basically for about 45 minutes around the north rather than... I've just arrived. Does make sense.
I think the people who live in Jerusalem, they will stay and be...
No more refugees.
No.
No more refugees.
But anyway, one day you will destroy.
Like the Berlin Wall.
Berlin Wall, 30 years, and we are now about 18 years.
Yeah.
But it's still 12 years more. But in
Excellent.
24 hours, it's gone.
In Britain, because of lack of sunshine for most of the time, people talk when they meet each other. They greet each other and they speak about the weather. They would make a reference to a beautiful day. And here I have noticed people at one point, they speak spontaneously about the checkpoint. How is the checkpoint today? The checkpoint is everything. The new wall is definitely different from the walls of the old city. I accept the walls of the old city.
We're moving from one Jerusalem neighborhood to another Jerusalem neighborhood. This is only for Palestinian neighborhoods. Actually, this is a good day. Not many people here. It's in the morning during rush hour. It's the most difficult time when you have students, sick people, people trying to make it to work. Every day you encounter a special incident. There is something that would touch you for a lifetime. There was an older woman, maybe like around 85, 90 years old. She was trying to go to pray. The soldiers were not letting her. They were asking her, do you have a permit? She would say no. In front of the soldiers, she sat down and she said, I want to go to Jerusalem to pray. And the soldiers started making fun of her. Also, I remember me and other young people and the other people, the Palestinians at the checkpoint were telling her, Grandma, Sitti, you need to go back. You need to go, they're not gonna let you in. But she insisted. She sat on the ground and she said, I want to go to Jerusalem to pray. So of course the army got upset, and we from the community, instead of inserting pressure on her to leave, we started encouraging her. We saw in her leadership that lacked in us. And I remember they called for reinforcements. Another 4 soldiers came in and they said, Grandma, with guns, you need to go. And she said, no, I'm not going anywhere. I want to go to Jerusalem to pray. She was insisting. Then 4 soldiers tried to carry her. They could not. Then the soldiers gave up and they said, you know, it is hell with you. Go to pray. And I remember she couldn't move, she couldn't walk and so on. She jumped and ran like a 3-year-old kid. Without the support of the community, without the support of anybody, only God. She made it to Jerusalem to pray.
I cannot claim today that I'm respecting Israel, because it's not possible to respect an apartheid regime and system which brings me injustice and unfairness. When I organize tours, I try to show what we are confronting is actually a very drastic and speedy transformation of our city. Wherever we go in this beautiful, majestic Damascus Gate, we see towers of police stations with cameras, microscopes to watch and to monitor the youth and the people walking in the streets and so on. This is not a political tour, but I just want you to see that there are Israeli soldiers everywhere. There is a very ugly scene today in Jerusalem, which I try not to beautify, but to be indifferent to these ugly scenes and to show what's left of the beautiful Palestine and treasures of the city of Jerusalem. These are organic figs, grape leaves, بعد رفتح. And this is Sharon's house. He made it his house, and he never actually lived here in this house. Yes, let's go on the occupation. We are here in the Muslim quarter. We cannot go in, unfortunately, because there is an occupation. Because before the occupation, Al-Aqsa Mosque was open for everybody. This is, I think, the most difficult and the most challenging part of the occupation.
What I want to do now is take you to the center of West Jerusalem and just show you how the occupation is not part of the lives and the thoughts of the people here.
It is as if visiting home. I'm originally from a refugee from West Jerusalem.
Are you?
Yes.
From where?
Talbiye.
So come visit the old homeland. Although Zionism played a role in that I was able to come here. You know, unlike Palestinian refugees that aren't able to come here. You know, I thought the idea of Israel wasn't such a bad idea if we could accommodate with the Palestinians. You know, I really believe that we could find a way to live together and so on. Israelis are able to dismiss it. They don't think about it. It's the land of Israel. It's in the Bible. It's unproblematic. It's ours. We came back. You guys, Palestinians, are intruders. and this whole claim that actually isn't true, but the whole claim that there's an organic tie between the Israelites and the Hebrews of the Bible and Jews of today, is what makes that tie. So, this is our land. Just go back and look at the Bible. And that's where Israel, of course, gets a lot of support from Christian fundamentalists, not just from the Jewish community and abroad. We don't use the word Palestinians. We talk about Arabs in a very undifferentiated way. We never use the word occupation. You don't talk about settlements. They're communities. You don't talk about settlers. They're Jewish residents of communities. So the whole language has sanitized everything. If you would talk to people, what is the occupation? Where is the occupation? What is a Palestinian? People wouldn't know what in the hell you're talking about. And that's where Israel has really won. It's insulated its people so much from the political reality that's 100 meters away. And so, in that sense, Israel wins, because it's taken the whole issue of Palestine off the table for Israelis. They don't even think about it. Okay, so we have to talk about that. All right. Okay, great. See you.
Theologically, assuming the validity of the theological argument, Ishmael is included in the blessing and in the promise of the multiplication. This is biblical too. The problem is if you try and you do succeed in having an ideology imposed on politics, or a dangerous mixture of and this is, by the way, for all Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Let's not forget, it was Umar ibn Khattab, more than 1400 years ago, in the year 638 approximately. He allowed the Jews back in Jerusalem. They were prohibited from living in Jerusalem for about 5 centuries. 1967, they demolished the Moroccan Quarter to expand the area in front of the Western Wall. Bulldozers demolishing everything, historical buildings, including a mosque, including school, and they have ultimately used graders so that they would level that land. Tourists would buy the idea that we have well-defined quarters. All the way from Lions Gate to Al-Wad Street, you have basically major Christian sites. There are Muslim families, for example, who live in the Christian quarter. It just, when you say Christian quarter or Muslim quarter, it doesn't sound right.
To build on what Dr. Mustafa said, my name is Umar, named after Umar ibn al-Khattab. Although I'm a Palestinian Christian from one of the main Christian families of Jerusalem, I was named after Khalifa Umar as a testimony to the beautiful relationship and to the beautiful tolerance that Umar ibn al-Khattab has expressed with his encounter with Patriarch Sophronius.
My late mother breastfed our Christian neighbor. Her name is Lamis. Because my mother breastfed Lamis, we became brother and sister. Brotherhood, sisterhood that is not based on a blood, line. It's a milk relationship.
From Roman times, they had this strategy that divide and conquer, and the British implemented this strategy very well.
We came down from the neighborhood that I live in, good infrastructure, the new US embassy, and then you drive down and first thing you get is a police station, a border police that kind of clarifies from this point on we need to be in control. And then you drive through a Palestinian neighborhood, but because there's a settlement here, the settlement behind us, then you see that there's good infrastructure, there's lights, there's sidewalks, and then the entrance to the settlement comes and just after it ends. There's no sidewalk. You're in a Palestinian neighborhood and you just really see the difference and the fact that nobody cares about the infrastructure from that point on, because really it's about infrastructure for Jewish population. That's the Israeli plan, to have as minimum people here as possible, to be able to keep the Jewish majority. And if we want to see a Jerusalem that is, worth living in for everyone in it, then it has to be one that is free of those concepts of racism, that's free of Zionism. I grew up in a kind of classic Zionist left household. So growing up knowing that we're against the occupation, but having no idea what the occupation is. For me, one of those like aha moments of understanding what those consequences are was actually years ago. I have a sister that's younger, 10 years younger than me. And we were on this trip with different families. So it was just me and her and then different random Israeli families. And we were together for a week. And it was a dinner and we were all talking about, you know, whatever small talk. And I was 22 at the time. Someone asked me, what did you do in the military? Which is a normal Israeli small talk conversation. And just before I answered, I saw my sister, kind of her face turning into this, really? Like, do we have to get into this argument again? Like, does it have to be like this every time? Can we just not just be normal? You know, and that's part of what being a dissident in different ways means. It's saying, no, we can't ever just be normal. Enlistment in Israeli society is the default, right? So choosing to step out of that is choosing to be different and to define yourself as different. And it has different consequences that are beyond prison. It's choosing to be an outsider that is the problem there. It's just a feeling that's there and it's heavy and sure. But it's nothing, right? I did that for a few months. Palestinians sit in prison before they're even convicted. In most cases, just for the duration of the trial and for years on when they are sentenced, right?
Don't you think that these measures make the people of Jerusalem feel safer? Building walls, checkpoints, more like a military or a police state?
We live in a state of fear and we are told to continue to be afraid regardless of what the reality is.
And I think that this is very strong within the Israeli mentality. I mean, security, we need to be strong, we need to have we need to be always in control and so on. It's also very evident within the education system, the holiday system, and so on.
Even when you ask Israeli officials, what is it about the wall that had to do with security? Like, Israeli security officials say very clearly, the wall doesn't prevent people from coming in. Inequality is an inherent part of the city. 40% almost of the city are not citizens of the state. They don't have the right to vote, to be elected, but more importantly, they can lose that. Like, that's what Zionism looks like in Jerusalem, because that's what the state looks like. Leverage, that is the key thing that we need to create. It's Palestinian resistance. And we can hope that that resistance will be popular and will not be, armed and things of the sort. When we talk about boycott campaigns, about divestment campaigns, it's about creating different frameworks of power that Palestinians have to leverage, to tell Israel, you want this to end? You want this to change? Okay, let's go to the table. Let's talk about what you give for that. That's not the discussion that's happening today.
The first thing that struck me, really the heavy weight of history that everyone here bears. It somehow feels that, people who live in Jerusalem come through time and through their lives just to carry the burden of its history. I think Palestinians many in East Jerusalem face pressure and a threat to move out. But if I can take the opportunity of this interview and speak through you directly to them, I would say despite the cost and despite the difficulties, do not give up. Never give up. Because Palestinians are not people who are coming through this land just renting their apartments or their houses for a short period of time before they move on. They are part of this land. They're part of this landscape.
One of our patron founders of Sabil is Bishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa. And he has this famous saying that says if an elephant is stepping on a mouse and you leave it for the elephant and the mouse to figure it out, you're taking the side of the elephant. And this is, I think, most of us Palestinians, we feel the international community observing us while we are on the margins and we need help. We're asking help.
And you're right to do that. You're absolutely right to demand that of the international community, not just to ask for it. In any context, this would never be a negotiation between equals.
So how much should we wait as Palestinians, or can we wait? We feel we are drowning and we refuse to drown, I think.
Well, that's a question that you Palestinians have to answer.
And hopefully we will.
Welcome to the South African Representative Office.
Thank you.
It's always good to see you.
You are a consulate here.
This is not really a state, so we call it a South African Representative Office. But it represents
It's an
everything
embassy.
of an embassy. We see the occupation. Part of what we're supposed to be doing is hosting Palestinians to our home. Most Palestinians, I can't host them at my residence. Part of our hospitality is to host people at our residence. And also as part of our diplomatic work. But we are denied that. Fundamentally, us as South Africans, we had created what was called the Patriotic Front. Those that opposed apartheid came together and we realized there were common principles. And I think Palestinians have to realize they have more in common than that which divides them. Interestingly, we were called terrorists. Those so-called terrorists that we were are people now line up to meet us. People want to benefit from our experiences. Even the international communities, and I wouldn't name countries, who have asked us to engage Palestinians across the board.
But don't you think the international community, when it comes to South Africa, the regime was racist and it had to go away? And there was strong solidarity. When it comes to us Palestinians, it seems Israel has impunity.
You see, we are the masters of our own destiny at the end of the day. Yes, it is true. International solidarity did play a role, an important role, in terms of boycott, sanctions, and whatever else, and isolation of apartheid South Africa. But if it wasn't the South African collective who took to the streets, the Palestinians have to work as a collective. You don't have a mass movement in engaging Israeli apartheid. And we engage people in terms of the common values that we have, in terms of dignity, in terms of human rights, in terms of democracy. And these common values will bring us together.
Underneath the golden dome of today that has to be respected is the foundation stone of the world, Mount Moriah. And yes, there is something there today.
Would you like to see God?
Listen, every religious Jew believes that one day in the future there will be the third temple. We're told that by our prophets. We're seeing the deserts bloom, the ingathering of the exiles. We have returned home. But there are some things that are in the hand of God. So the third temple itself, very much in the same position that Abraham attempted to sacrifice Isaac, where the first temple was of King Solomon. And the second temple will also be the third temple, but there are some things that are handed by God, not in man's hand. Having a Jew go to the Temple Mount today to pray, to walk around the holiest place for the Jewish people in a place that Muhammad never visited. The first temple existed 1700 years before the Dome of the Rock was even built. Some things in the process has to be left to God.
But the process has begun with the tunnels, Daniel.
No, it's nothing to do with the Temple Mount. There's only one tunnel and it's parallel to the Western Wall, nothing to do with the Temple Mount itself. It's absurd hysteria from the Arab world. I'd be more concerned about the illegal Arab building on the Temple Mount. That's a disgrace, and yet they've managed to get away with building a huge mosque on the Temple Mount, destroying things for the Second Temple period. That's something that should be discussed, not what the Jews are doing walking on the outside of the Temple Mount. The Jewish people have some responsibility to act in a certain way in accordance to the laws that we were given by the Bible itself. It's very difficult for me to know exactly today, as many rabbis found it difficult to know exactly what was the specific thing that God was angry at the Jews about. The only people that know the future are prophets and fools, and I'm neither. One of my favourite places to be here in Jerusalem, without a doubt, is this corridor, the old Roman road that used to look like that. There's place in Israel for Christians, for Muslims, for anyone. We're not talking about sovereignty. You can't compromise on sovereignty. No one hands away their homeland. This is not a multicultural democratic society. This is not another Australia or America or France or England. No, this is a Jewish state for Jewish people.
So we are now in the Kanisat al-Qiyamah, which translates to the Church of the Resurrection. Every day, very early in the morning, the Muslim families would open the doors of the church because the church is divided by different Christian denominations, and there was a dispute on who should have the keys for the door. So they divided the church. But when it came to the consensus, they agreed on the Muslim families. They knew that these Muslim families are well respected.
Just look right now, I mean, as Palestinians, both you as a Christian and I as a Muslim, we are a very, very tiny minority now where we are sitting. You know, it's just like as if this is not our space.
In the past, we used to worship in this church. This church is called the center of the world, because of the importance of the empty tomb of Christ. For some centuries, we have been forced out to make space for pilgrims and foreigners, and we were moved to one of the churches outside the complex of the Church of the Resurrection.
The same thing at Al-Aqsa Mosque, for example. No tourists would be turned away. They will just go through the Moroccan gate. But there are restrictions on Muslims, even those who have Jerusalem ID or have Israeli citizenship.
My nephew and my niece, their dream is to come to Jerusalem. They don't have a permit. Their dream is to come to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
There are guys that they are trying to Judaize Jerusalem. You are the only one that can save the city, and if you will not do it now, I fear that in the future will not be nothing to save, because the settlers, they are working secretly, systematically, and they are taking everything they can. So you should do something immediately. The city is under risk. I was one of the founders of a settlement in the Gaza Strip, Netzarim. Oh. Netzarim. With these hands, I was one of the founders of Netzarim. It's incredible. I feel during these days so proud to be a settler. It takes 1 or 2 years before I realize that something, it doesn't work. Each ideology has a price. And the price that we are paying for the ideology of the great Israel is too much. It's too much. Three months after arrive, I enter into the army. I go to the army because I say that this is my role. Zionists should go to the army and fight for the country. In October 1973, the Yom Kippur War started. 2 weeks after, I was injured in front of the 3rd Egyptian army in Sinai. I was in an hospital for several months. When I start to look around me and to see people dying in the hospital and mothers that they lose their sons or sons that they lose their fathers, then I start the process that take me from the right wing to the left, to the Zionist left at the beginning, and after then to the non-Zionist left. This is the place where I am now. It was very hard to me to leave my right-wing friends. I changed my mind, but I couldn't change my social group. And it takes 1 year before I say, okay, no more right wings. It's easier to change your mind than to change your social environment. I was alone in the country.
We've been traveling for a week and we've seen all the reality on the ground in Jerusalem. It's miserable. You've met the politicians, they say there's no hope. You meet the United Nations, they say literally there's nothing we can do, it is up to you. We must remain resilient, we must overcome. Justice for the Palestinians, an end of the occupation. Join the civil society of the Palestinian community. Initiatives like economic sanctions, economic measures in resisting the occupation, like BDS and so on. We cannot give in to the powerful Israeli decision makers and their allies, the Trumps and the powerful in the world. We must come together. We owe it not only for us or for Jerusalem, a holy place for all religions, but for every future generation. Empires come and go, but the people remain in the earth. This is the story with what has happened throughout every empire who crossed Palestine. They have disappeared and became ruins, but the people still stand here.